The Victoria Line was the first line to be built under central London since the early 1900s, but its purpose was not to take commuters to a specific place or suburb. Moreover, it was created to provide a more convenient route to central services and link the four busiest main overground terminus together, that being King's Cross, St Pancras, Euston and Victoria at the time. The idea was first brought forward as early as 1948, but the idea was put on the backbench due to funding and due to its unusual proposed usage. It was obvious it would not make much money to support itself, but thanks to overground congestion and traffic, the proposed line got a new wind and the government helped fund it. The government, keen to turn the wave of rising unemployment levels, helped get the project off the ground, provided that some of the sections of the tunnel would need to be produced off-site and in areas where unemployment was at its highest. The BTP agreed, and work began in 1963. The Victoria Line was created with automation and technology in mind. This included the minimising of staff, and for the first time the train driver acted as both driver and guard. Doors were operated by a button in the operator's cab, and braking and acceleration were controlled by automatic electrical commands from within the cab. The driver also had to be in continuous contact with the new control centre near Euston. For the first time, automatic fare collection was used on the line, and a magnetic strip on the tickets would ensure passengers would only be let onto and exit a platform with the correct fare paid. The technology fared very well, but it couldn't keep up with the demand, and taking valuable lessons from it, it was replaced in the 80s. It was understood that the line would need to be reliant on funding from other lines' profits. Because of this, the new various station budgets would be a tight one. The tiling on the stations were an uninviting grey and blue, while the tiles were prone to cracking, with vibration adding to the negative and bleak feel of the new stations. So, to try to counteract this with as little cost as possible, the Design Research Unit was commissioned to work with the London Transport Chief Architect Kenneth Seymour. Together, they added splashes of colour to the dreary station in the form of motifs. Using a little imagination, each motif represented each station with vivid colour and its own identity. The stock that ran on the new line merged beautifully with the uncluttered feel of the new stations. High-set windows in the doors made their appearance, and the interiors were minimal and spacious. The wraparound cab windows were styled with modern times, and the train whistle was cleverly integrated with one of the front cab handles. One of the more unusual features was the cab door itself. Instead of being at the side of the door, like most trains, the cab door was situated at the front. This was a great safety feature, as it was impossible for the driver to leave the cab while the controls were set to automatic, preventing runaways. The Victoria Line was eventually pushed through with the tightest of budgets and almost broke the entire system. However, it proved itself by taking over 82 million people in its first year alone, more than making up for the £92 million it cost to make it. And the line, while significantly changed over the years, remains one of the most important and profitable lines on the network. While the Victoria Line was being built, the underground management system was changing around it. The British London Transport Commission was abolished, and the London Transport Board took its place, answering only to the Ministry of Transport. The board only had two requirements it had to fill: provide an adequate service to the people of London, and to pay its own way. By 1965, operating costs and postponement of fare increases to compensate meant that the board had not fulfilled its obligation. The government was forced to step in, and the Treasury had to finance the deficit and the lower fares were causing. In 1970, the control of London Transport was transferred to the Greater London Council. This meant all budgetary requirements for the Underground were set by the Council and the Treasury would stop funding. Victoria owes its £92 million building cost from the government and the council collectively, Without them, the project would have stalled and the Underground most likely would have been declared bankrupt. As one of its transfer agreements, the government agreed to write off all debts accumulated in order to help the Underground become self-supporting, drawing a line under sand from its previous debt-filled life. The new board hit the ground running and wanted to start proposing several new lines. Many, like Victoria Line, had been sitting around as plans on paper since the early 40s, and it was hoped that the new council would help support these large new ventures, while the Underground became more self-sufficient with its lower running costs. The economic state of the country, however, proved too much for the council, and tensions began to brew about the rising costs and what was the right thing to do for passenger fares. The council and the Underground did agree to help fund a new line near Heathrow Airport. The airport had been growing in popularity, and having it linked via the Underground would mean it would be a world first. The government, at first relieved of its burden, couldn't help with the project with the council providing the funding, but it did eventually match the council with a 25% grant, with the railway then providing the rest. The extension used the tried and tested cut and cover method to help create the new line, with tunnel boring machines used to create the twin tunnels under the runway, and was built close to Terminal 1 and 2. Another project that the London Transport Board were keen to get started on was the Jubilee Line. Originally called the Fleet Line, it too had a similar history to the Victoria. It remained on the bench until the 40s, until it was dusted off and plans were put into place for its construction. Its purpose was to connect the Bakerloo section of the Underground to Stanmore and Baker Street. The government and the council gave the project the green light, and the council gave another 25% investment. Work began. In 1977, just as the line was nearing completion, the council advised that the name of the line was to be changed in honour of the Queen's Jubilee. The Jubilee had since been and gone, but it was opened by Prince Charles in 1979. These new lines gave the Underground a new lease of life and able to accommodate nearly 3 million passengers daily. And it seemed that the Underground was back on track once again. However, the 28th of February 1975 was to test the Underground in a way that they haven't seen since the war. But that's a video for another time.